In this video, we will look at the representation question for component 1, how to take notes if it's a video extract, how to plan your answer, and we'll also compare Kiss the Vampire to an unseen media text. So let's have a look at component 1 and the representation question, which will be a 30-mark question, and you're going to spend about 50 minutes in total on this answer. If we look at the question, we can boil it down into these basic areas. So how has something been represented? Why has it been represented? How did the audience respond? And then also you need to compare the representation. So basically 4 basic areas that you'll need to cover in your answer. If the extract is a video extract, you are going to have to take some notes. Again, there's no right or wrong way how you take notes. It really is down to you. So this is just one suggestion. For the first viewing, you will just watch. The second viewing, you will make notes. You'll have 5 minutes to make further notes. Then there'll be a third viewing to make some more notes, and then you'll begin your answer. So just to remind you, the representation question is a comparison to an unseen media text. So you're going to use one of the set texts. So it could be Kiss the Vampire, it could be Tide, Water Aid, Dream, Riptide. Other centres might do Formation instead of Riptide, the Times and the Daily Mirror. And you compare this to something completely unseen, which could be a music video, a newspaper, or some more marketing and advertising. So here's an example from the exam in November 2020. So the representation question was to compare a music video to the Water Aid advert. And this is kind of how it would look on the exam paper, something like this. So when taking your notes, you're looking out for different elements which contribute to the representation of certain characters. So for example, are there obvious stereotypes of either gender, ethnicity, age, places, issues or events? In terms of visual codes, examples of colour which contributes to the representation of these characters. Costume, hair and makeup, their behaviour, the location they're in, any props they use. What about lighting? And technical codes, how has the camera been used in order to come across their representation? What about sound, editing, binary oppositions, genre, is that important to the representations that you see? And also the narrative might be important as well. It is possible there might be more than one representation. So if that's the case, then you might have to duplicate the note-taking grid if there's going to be more than one. So I picked an example where there's only one really obvious representation. There is a male character in the advert as well, but I'm just going to focus on the representation of the woman in the advert, because the made-up question I've just made up is representation of women in your set text and the unseen text. So again, you're going to have that 5-minute gap in between seeing the extracts to make your notes. So in total, 10 minutes to get your note-taking grid written down. And I will now go through my example of taking notes for this Miss Dior advert. So let's take a look at my notes for this Miss Dior advert. So first thing is stereotypes. Are there any stereotypes that just spring out to me straight away? So, well, the Hollywood actress in the perfume advert, you could argue that is a stereotype. And you have the stereotypical heterosexual relationship within this advert as well. In terms of visual codes, red, white and pink are big important colours which do contribute to the representation of the Hollywood actress Natalie Portman. Costume, designer dresses, at some point she's not wearing clothes or she's wearing a boyfriend's shirt, so that might be important for a representation. Having long loose hair, she jumps off a bridge in terms of behaviour, she throws flowers at her boyfriend, there's a sex scene, there's like a car stunt thing going on. In terms of the car, she's doing like donuts in the sand, and there's also an argument with her boyfriend as well. In terms of lighting, it's mostly high key throughout. In terms of location, we've got California, Los Angeles probably. We've got Paris, the Eiffel Tower. We've got locations of the beach and a luxury house, which do contribute to the representation of her. In terms of props, you've got that pink fast sports car. In terms of casting, we've got like a male actor who we don't tend to see his face in the advert, and we've also have a group of female friends. In terms of technical codes, there is a low angle shot of Natalie Portman at the start. She breaks the fourth wall, so direct address to the audience. In terms of sound, we have some diegetic sounds. She says prove it to her boyfriend, And at the end, she also says, "What would you do for love?" And in terms of the song that's used, some important lyrics. There's one lyric, for example, "I want to fly," so you could use that for the representation. In terms of editing, it's very fast paced. It's done in a montage sequence, so a large space of time is condensed into 45 seconds. In terms of binary oppositions, we have the relationship, so we have woman versus man. In terms of genre, well, this repeats a lot of the conventions that you would see in perfume adverts. In terms of narrative, character types, so you could argue this challenges character types. And then I've also mentioned we've got that montage sequence, which feels non-linear. It doesn't feel like it's in the correct order. There's no beginning, middle, or end for this advert. So how do you plan your answer? Well, this is one approach that you could adopt. So you need a very, very short intro, and I probably mean like a sentence for your introduction. So you're going to say, in my answer, I will compare the representations, see if they reinforce or challenge representations by using Stuart Hall, Zunen, and Gauntlet. That's it. Move on. You want to get to your analysis as quickly as possible because that's where you're going to get your marks. So you could break it up like this. So you could use 3 different theorists. You're not going to use everything they say, just the important parts. Then you're going to finish it with a conclusion. So for my example, I've chosen Hall, Zunen, and Gauntlet. So in terms of Hall, stereotypes. In terms of Zunen, objectification. In terms of Gauntlet, past and the present. And in terms of, if I've got some extra time left over, I could add some Judith Butler in there if I wanted to, or I could just add more examples in the theories I've chosen already. Now, there is a right way of using theory and a wrong way of using theory. What you want to avoid is just telling the examiner what the theory is. You don't want to do that because they are examiners, they are media teachers, they know all about the theories. You do not need to explain the theories to them. They want to see the analysis. So do not do stuff like this. Zunen said that display of women's bodies as objects to be looked at a core element of Western patriarchal culture. Avoid doing that because the examiner knows that. You're not telling them anything they don't know. They want to see you doing your analysis. So how to get around that? Do this instead. I would argue that the female victim in the Kiss Vampire poster is objectified. Brackets Zunen because. Now you've just used 2 words, objectified and Zunen, and that tells the examiner you know this theory and you are now going to use it. And you've saved yourself a sentence there as well. Remember, time is precious in the exam. Time is your enemy. You do not want to be running out of time for each of your answers. Okay, so if I just quickly go through my answer. So I'm just going to do this quickly off the top of my head and see how we go. So in my introduction, I've already said I'm going to be looking at the representations and whether they reinforce or challenge representations by using Stuart Hall, Zunen, and Gauntlet. So if I begin with stereotypes and Stuart Hall, so obviously Kiss the Vampire does have a stereotypical representation of a woman in peril, which is linked to 1960s and Hammer horror. So for that, look at your notes and watch some videos on YouTube like the Miss Fisher channel about Kiss the Vampire. And if I were to compare that to the Miss Dior, so in 2021, you could argue this is a very stereotypical representation you would find in perfume adverts. And then you could also say Kiss the Vampire does challenge stereotypes because we've got the female vampire. And then you could also argue Miss Dior as well is also challenging a lot of representations of women that you might find in some media. And if we then go to Zunen, so the female vampire and the female victim is objectified. So again, look at your notes for that one. And in terms of Miss Dior, you could argue this is not aimed at men, this advert's aimed at women. So when she is revealing parts of her body, it's not about male pleasure, but it is about women empowerment. She's confident about her body and who she is. And in terms of Gauntlet, past and the present, so we can talk about how back in the past women were seen as victims and had to be rescued in Hammer horror films, although there is that challenge there of the strong female vampire. And if we look at the modern day adverts, so any modern day advert which is aimed at women, you do have strong representations of women. And then I just round off my conclusion where I could say something like, I believe both media texts, they reinforce some stereotypes or representations, but they do also challenge some as well. So hopefully you get a sort of impression of the beginning, middle and end And obviously I went through that very quickly. I'd add more examples in and explain it in more detail as I went along, but that's just a very brief overview. In the next video, we'll look at Component 1, Section B, which is Media, Industries and Audiences, and look at how you go about tackling some of those large questions.